Welcome back to the conversation with Ryan Cornforth. Let's continue to talk about solar on the roof. With the electrical infrastructure, do you run into sometimes constraints? So I'll give you an example. My nephew lives in a condominium complex and it's in the inner city, so it is dealing with existing infrastructure, and out of the 8 units, only the first 3 could either have air conditioning or an electric charger for their vehicle, just because of the service to that site.
Interesting.
Otherwise, all 8 owners have to get together to increase that service. Are you guys running into those kind of constraints on the, and when I say inner city, it's the oldest part of the city, right? Where the infrastructure is the oldest, and you might have, like you say, the 30 amp or the 60 amp service to a facility. Have you ran into things like that yet?
It can be a factor. Typically from a solar standpoint, everything that we've installed so far on buildings is all falling under microgenerator regulations, which is, at its simplest, it basically says you can produce what you consume. So you can't build a solar array that produces 200% of what the building or the home consumes. So the idea being that in theory, and again, very much in theory, but in theory, the existing infrastructure should be able to handle whatever the solar array output is. There should be no need for infrastructure upgrades. And that's a big part of the reason that the microgenerator regulation is written the way that it is. They avoid this situation where they're put in a tough spot of having to do major infrastructure upgrades because somebody put a solar farm in back half of their acreage or whatever, right? So they have different rules. You are allowed to do that, but you no longer would fall under the microgenerator. It completely changes the economics of how these things work. Going back to kind of original stuff that I said, you no longer would be eligible for solar club. Changes a lot of the economics, changes a lot of the inputs that go into the design aspect of things. So it's possible to take an acreage in somewhere on the Springbank, say, for example, and put a solar farm in your backyard, but you would not fall under what would be considered the microgenerator regulation.
Even our generator, it's a totally different ballgame.
It's a totally different ballgame. That's exactly right. So that kind of, again, I want to stress, in theory, sort of solves the problem of if your house only needs to draw in 60 amps of service at any given time, you should really only need to push out 60 amps of service at any given time as well. That's kind of the simplest way to look at it.
And you mentioned a couple times the solar club. What is the solar club?
Essentially, it's a byproduct of our deregulated market in Alberta. It's a setup that if you are a microgenerator, if you have solar on your home or your business, anything under 150 kilowatt system size, you are eligible to manipulate throughout the year what rate you are on for electricity. The goal becomes to sort of time the parts of the year. So basically, in general, what we find is mid to late March, most houses start to outproduce what they consume. So that's when the sun's up for longer, it's higher in the sky, you're producing more electricity out of your solar panels. Simple math on that. And then you want to sort of time it so that when you have those days and those months, stretches, where you are overproducing and sending back into the grid, you are actually buying and selling your power at a higher rate. So the solar club rate in the summer months is 30 cents a kilowatt hour, which means you do buy at 30 cents a kilowatt hour, but you also sell back to the grid at 30 cents a kilowatt hour. So because you're outproducing and sending more back to the grid during those summer months, you are actually generating a credit on your bill. Most homes, if the system size is designed properly, kind of to that 100% mark that falls right under the microgenerator regulation, June, July, August, for sure, you should be generating a few $100s in credits. Depending on how your system is set up, how your usage works, some houses we even see the shoulder seasons of March, April, May, and September and October a lot of times can generate smaller credits as well, where you might have a $50, $100 credit on your bill for those months. And then what you can do, depending on which one of the providers you're with, you can either take, mine for example, if I generate 2 months in a row of credit, they just send me the money. So you're literally paid out by the utility provider and given a check or an e-transfer. If not, if you want to ride your credit into the winter months, we've had some customers that have been very, very near a zero bill over the course of a 12-month stretch. If you averaged it all out, you are still going to receive a bill in December when the panels are snow covered and there's not a lot of production happening. You're going to get sort of a similar bill to what your December would have been pre-solar, but you're going to have those credits built up. That game of averaging it out over the course of the year. And the line owners who have kind of been a part of the microgenerator regulation, that's their goal as well, is that it's over the course of 12 months. They want your kilowatt hour usage to match your kilowatt hour output of the solar array. They're okay if you generate a credit through the summer as long as you're not sort of also generating a credit through the winter months as well. That's sort of the goal. So I don't know of any other provinces that have any even remotely similar. I know that BC, for example, everything runs through BC Hydro. They run a very simplistic, if you generate 100 kilowatt hours, you have a credit of 100 kilowatt hours. And if at the end of the year you've oversized your system and accidentally generated an extra 500 kilowatt hours, they vanish into thin air. So there's not necessarily any type of economic benefit to increasing that system size. So in Alberta, it does gamify things a little bit. We definitely see people trying to push the envelope on system size because there's economic benefit to it, but it's fair. We try to design all the systems right to that 100% mark because it's a very fair system and the economics work very, very well at that mark. So try to keep in line with that regulation.
So we've talked a lot about like the residential side. Switching gears a little bit to the commercial side, are a lot of the same regulations in play for the commercial side? So say if a commercial building owner, could he be classified as a micro generator and go into the solar club as well too?
Yes, and there's size rules around that. So I would say there's probably a class of small business cases and then larger scale business cases. So the microgenerator application and rules apply up to 150 kilowatts system size. That's a relatively large system size. Most businesses are going to be well under that system size, so they're going to kind of play by almost the identical rules as a homeowner. They're kind of going to design the systems in exactly the same way. I know for our shop, that's exactly how we did it. We set the system size up almost identically to all of our houses, run this exact same way through the solar club, and managed it kind of the same way as you would on your home. Those types of businesses, small, it's hard to put a square footage on it because it really depends on what the operations of the building are. It's got far more to do with that than what the square footage. There's 900 square foot shops that use way more power than you could ever produce on 900 square feet of office space. But at the same time, there's 50,000 square foot warehouses that just run lights all day.
And that's it.
Yeah, they'd be fine with 20 panels up there. So you're always kind of balancing that out and trying to figure out what the right system size is. Once you leave the microgenerator, call it stratosphere or whatever, once you're no longer eligible for that, it does definitely change the economics around, some differences in how that works. But at the same time, a lot of times your billing structures are different. If you're a megawatt size arena or somebody that's really just cranking a lot of power out at any given day, a lot of times you're making different deals with the utility providers anyway. So you're a lot of times in a billing structure that you wouldn't want to change it over to the solar club anyways. A lot of times what we're seeing is that there's benefits in the way that these blocks of power are bought at that level that make it beneficial to go with solar anyways. And again, I think solar is becoming a part of these negotiations as well, right? Like there's huge benefits to these large utility provider contracts where they're RFPing to multiple contracts or multiple sites, say for a large user. They're all of a sudden able to work in some solar aspects of this. And it can be beneficial for both of them because those blocks of power are bought and paid for, and if they're at a good rate, they're always going to get sold. It's not like they're evaporating into thin air either. So there's kind of mutual benefit to introducing some solar into the mix and bringing that consumption down, allowing the provider to sell that, whether it's at an RRO rate or just to another block. They can offload the power that they've sort of negotiated in already for that customer, and that customer can really levelize out their cost of electricity. They know, because a lot of these are based on sort of rolling rates, and there's some discrepancies. We see again with a lot of businesses right now, they're seeing their rates go from 4 cents to 6 cents a kilowatt hour, which again is like, oh, that's only 2 cents a kilowatt hour. It's also 50% increase, right? So there's two ways to look at that. And when we talk to a ton of places where utilities is the second largest expense, you look at their P&Ls and it's wages, utilities. That's 1, 2. And so when you have a 50% increase to one of the items that makes up your utilities bill, it can be pretty detrimental to the way you run your business. As just everyday consumers, like, we're seeing that. We're seeing that in price increases and all this inflation that's happening. And so I think where solar can play in that is an opportunity to levelize that. It's not an end-all be-all. And I think that's one of the things that, being in the industry for a few years now, like, we've really tried to impart on people is like, we're not in here trying to convince people that solar is the answer and that the world is going to fall apart unless we go 100% solar in the next 10 years here. Like, it is a part of a bigger solution to a problem that we really do have. I don't think people necessarily understand how much of it has to do with these power increases, that everybody that's trying to make something is paying a heck of a lot more for their power than they were 2, 3, 5 years ago right now.
Well, you see it on the news, even homeowners, they get their $900
That's right.
electrical bill. And you think, conversely, on a commercial side, when that company gets a $90,000 power bill,
Totally.
that they don't work for free. They have to pass those costs along.
Yeah.
So on the microgeneration side, you said 150 kilowatts. How many panels would that be?
Large microgenerator can be from 150 kilowatts to 5,000 kilowatts. I'd have to do a little bit of research on the large microgenerator rules. They're similar. So that number of panels, you're typically, I'd say for a commercial system, right now you're around a 500 watt panel. 150 kilowatts is 150,000 watts. I'm not even going to attempt that, but 150,000 divided by a 500 watt panel, you're kind of in the neighborhood of 300.
A lot of the commercial aspects, like we see, like schools and commercial, and say in Calgary, the TELUS Spark, I know they have power jet, that's under 300 panels.
Those are right on the edge of moving into that large microgenerator, which again, the idea, like I said, going back to kind of, a lot of those consumers would be buying power in a very different way than you and I are. They're not just taking kind of spot pricing or taking the Easy Max by NMax rate and signing up for a 3-year plan and giving her. They're negotiating these. There's RFPs. There's processes that go into buying those blocks of power. They rely on it. They're a part of the grid stability conversation about how that all works, and they're a part of these conversations about larger projects like this that happen. And they're entering into power purchasing agreements with the solar farms that you see popping up. There are parts of these projects as well. So it's a different game.
Yeah, when I worked for the city, both up in Edmonton, various departments, we'd have that one-on-one discussion with the utility provider to get their best rate. It's not, this is the rate we post to everybody.
Yeah.
It's totally different negotiations after that when you're looking at the size of square footage that some of these REITs and everything have on there.
Yes, exactly.
So what are some of the challenges that you guys have experienced? Maybe challenges outward facing and inward facing. Maybe inward facing. I know there's a lot of companies, and it's like every other industry, when it starts, everybody wants to flood the market and become an installer. Has that posed problems?
I would say so for inward facing stuff, definitely it's still a service industry, a people industry. I mean, the products, they're part of the solution, but we've always talked about this at the roofing company and now at the solar company. It's a service industry, and you're there. The service you are providing is peace of mind, this openness to customers. You're entering their homes or their businesses, you're putting on a piece of equipment, and you've got to be there to service them and service it when it's all said and done. So trying to find people and find tradespeople, I know for a fact we are not the only ones dealing with it. I know this is industry-wide, this is worldwide. I would say from an inward-facing, as a startup company, trying to find people that are willing to take a chance on you, take a chance on the company, put their futures kind of in your hands and let you run with it and run with you on it, right? Like that's huge. And we've been really lucky. We've found some incredible people and we've had some incredible people come through and help us kind of get to where we're at. So I think been very, very fortunate there, but it's always a struggle. You're always looking for the next crew. You're always looking for the next project manager, next person that's going to kind of take some aspect of the company and develop and grow. So I think internally that is and almost forever will be our biggest challenge there. Externally, I think to your point, absolutely. I've seen more what I would consider fringe and I would say flat out unethical business practices in the solar industry than I saw in the last year and a half or 2 years than I saw in 10 years of roofing. It is a gold rush mentality. It is very much a get in, market's hot, let's see how much we can get our hands on, and then you can tell very quickly that these companies have been built with the intention of folding them quite quickly. We were reading an article today, these high pressure sales tactics, cautionary tales of homeowners being kind of swindled into purchases that don't make any economic sense. That stings because that's the whole industry gets looped into that very quickly. From an outward facing standpoint, that's probably our biggest challenge right now. There's other stuff that compounds on it, right? Well, we talked about the imagery of the panels coming from less than ideal regions of the world, and then you kind of compound onto that these high pressure sales, and yeah, you get people that have a very negative view of the industry, and I don't blame them. I get it.
I was very pleased when you were talking about solar ready, getting everything and making that customer educated so they know when to move forward. Because a pet peeve of mine, and I know it would be of yours too, is when you're going for a walk at night and you see a solar installation going up on a roof and you're like, yeah, those shingles have been there for 18 years and they just go right over top of them.
Yeah.
I almost feel like going knocking on their door and saying, did he tell you that you're probably gonna have to replace your roof next year with the curled shingles with no granules left on them? And that does paint everybody with a bad brush. It's just setting those apart, the good from the bad. Even in the roofing industry, where we're faced with the same thing, right?
Yeah.
A couple days after another large storm in Calgary, and I'm driving down Queen Elizabeth Highway from Edmonton to Leduc, and I must have seen a dozen ladders on trucks with Bob's Roofing, Chuck's Roofing, driving down to Calgary because you can almost tell they're wiping their hands behind the steering wheel that, there's a lot of work down there.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So I think it's a challenge in every industry at some point in time.
For sure.
So you talked about the challenges. I want to talk about what would you consider your biggest win? In the trades, everybody's always proud or especially proud of certain things. Is there one project involved solar that you kind of drive by and you say, yeah, I was part of that. It was challenging, but it's big and it works and you're proud to put that Rocky Mountain solar name on?
I don't know that there's necessarily a project per se. I'm the most proud of what I would say probably would resonate with kind of the whole team that we have is just sort of the strides that we have taken within the industry in getting some take up in a homeowner that has really no idea, a contractor that likely doesn't really know either. The people that are up on that roof installing on that 18-year-old curled shingle, they probably have no idea that thing is essentially a failed roof at this point. We've had a lot of success and a lot of wins within the industry with getting people to acknowledge these types of things and getting people to acknowledge the term solar ready and that there's not a great case for every building in the city. It's not cool to put solar panels on the north side of a 20-year-old roof. Those are not feasible. And we have to a point where we had issues on a school project, and we were the ones who basically said, like, we need to essentially cancel this half of the contract because there's no structural stability here. We're not going to put solar panels over top of a gymnasium where a bunch of small kids are going to play. We lost several $100,000 worth of a contract over it, but it was the right thing, and we got structural engineers to back that up and say, yeah, there's absolutely no way we can put solar on this roof facet. And hopefully for some people was eye-opening that the contractor was the one willing to sit back and say, like, this roof is not solar ready. This roof is not capable of what you guys want it to do. And so those are the types of things on a more grand scale, I think the ARCA has been an awesome partner in that. We want to work with roofing contractors. We want to work with envelope contractors. We want to work with the consulting worlds of both the electrical and building envelope and building science sides, right? When I get emails from a roof consultant, a large engineering firm asking, what do you think about this scenario? What should we do here? Like, those are the ones where I have a lot of kind of pride in getting those ones and having some input and being able to say, like, this is what I think you should do, this is why, and also I'm maybe not the best resource for this, go talk to so-and-so. Here's the person that can answer this question for you. And I think that's hopefully, in at least some people's eyes, I think that's what we're trying to build is a company that you can come ask the questions, and it's not necessarily going to be a sales pitch that you're going to get. It's going to be more of a genuine, like, here's the information source that you're looking for, because I think that's largely what the industry needs. It's a stark difference from the roofing industry, and you hear the stories. My business partner, Justin, his dad was our mentor in the roofing industry for a lot of years, and if there's one thing Roger kind of taught us about that whole aspect of integrity and all of it, again, going back to kind of the service mentality, is that, like, you cannot put your name behind it. You cannot tell people these types of things unless you know, right? And unless you have that background to be able to say this is okay to do. And we understand what the practices were in the roofing industry 40, 50 years ago, and a lot of that stuff wasn't happening. And the ARCA was a huge part in coming in, and when it was formed, it was a group of contractors that wanted to do the right thing, that wanted to put some weight behind, yeah, we say there's a warranty, that actually means something. Yeah, we say that we're going to stand behind this detail or this way of best practices. Yeah, that actually means something. And I think we tried to really roll that into the solar industry and say, like, look, everybody says they go by best practices, but they don't even know what a 20-year-old roof system looks like and what that means. So how can they say it unless there's a standard for that? So that's been, to me, the biggest wins that we've had, is when we've gotten those calls to say, hey, what's the best practice on this? What should the standard be here?
Where you're regarded as I don't want to use the word authority, but you're a valuable resource to the whole industry.
That's right. I'm sure ARCA gets a lot of those calls, right? It just, hey, what should the standard be for this? There isn't a written standard already. It's, I think ARCA,
yeah.
Right. Who would you point us to? Oh, go talk to so-and-so from this company. Yeah, they've dealt with this before or whatever. So that, I think, is a big part of what we want to be in the industry, for sure.
Perfect. Well, Ryan, this has been very interesting. I've learned a lot. Hopefully the listeners here have learned some things, and thank you very much for your time. I appreciate sitting down with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Thank you for listening to another episode of ARCA's Elevated Views. We hope you have enjoyed the program. For additional information on ARCA, our contractors, or our program, please go to arcaonline.ca. Or you could follow us on Instagram at Roofing Careers, or on LinkedIn at ARCA-Alberta Roofing Contractors Association. Thanks, and have a great day.